Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Welcome to Blindsight. This is Bill Lundgren, your host, and it's going to be an exciting program today because we're going to be talking about prosthetics in blindness, which is, a new thing that's still developing, but it's certainly something that we ought to know something about. And we need to, and we'll be talking from a mental health standpoint about prosthetics in the sense that, it's one thing to restore sight, let's say, but quite another in terms of adjusting to it and having other people, if we decide to go that route, to have other people adjust to us being different from the way we are right now. So I'm real delighted to have our guest today. Lily is a PhD candidate and working at the California State University. Is that right, Lily?
Yes, at UC Santa Barbara. And
in the
sorry to interrupt.
Bionic.
I'm still a PhD student yet. Hopefully I'll become a candidate later this quarter, but I don't want to jinx anything.
Oh, I see. Okay. So you're in the Bionic department working with the vision devices for prostheses. How did you get into that, and why did you get into that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been kind of I guess I'll say random journey. I've had a few different positions since my undergrad research in research psychology, where I started working with Dr. Laura Cacciamani at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, studying auditory perception and how different people perceive different sounds differently. And then from there, I had the opportunity to have an internship at NASA, where I studied how different astronauts' brains react differently to being in space. And you can see kind of a theme here. I've always been interested a bit in these individual differences and perception. And back a few years ago, I experienced a concussion, which sort of led me to have this condition called face blindness, and it has improved since the onset of that condition. But experiencing how those differences in perception can manifest in my own experience also led me to want to know more about how all of that works.
So that you have a real experience in what you're working with, then that certainly says a lot for your empathy with people who come into your program.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, and I appreciate that. I think it's really important to consider these individual differences, because just as everyone has a different experience with their vision or with their blindness or any level of visual impairment, people will have different levels of experience with their visual prostheses. And I think considering that is really something that's super important.
Music to my ears, yes. Because sometimes you feel like you're a device yourself when working with some people who are well-intentioned, but they forget we're human beings. Now, in your work, I know that visual prosthesis is new. Are we talking about restoring sight to people who've been blind from birth or newly blind right
Definitely.
now?
And I think that what you said about considering people as devices is a really important point too. emphasize because these devices that are in development aren't one-size-fits-all solutions necessarily. They need to consider where people are at and what they're doing in their daily lives, and if they're even the right decision for people. And to your question, these aren't typically devices for people, or these aren't really devices for people who have been congenitally blind since birth. People who are able to be implanted with these devices need to have had some level of visual experience. So people who have typically acquired blindness through either a trauma to the visual system or through a disease like retinitis pigmentosa will typically be people who are candidates for these devices.
The RP is where the RP is not total.
Typically for these devices, for retinitis pigmentosa in particular, there was a device on the market back, I think it had FDA approval around 2010, but between like 2010 for the next maybe 10 years or so, there was a device called the Argus 2, and that was for people who had almost to complete total vision loss. So very little light perception, but mostly focusing on people who had no light perception from retinitis pigmentosa or from age-related macular degeneration.
That is amazing. Well, what can people expect when they go in or look at prostheses? What, some people, would have all kinds of expectations. What do you think is realistic for people to be thinking about if they decide to explore that for themselves?
I think that's a great question. And I think that there's a couple of directions that expectations should be considered in. One would be those perceptual outcomes. So, what could people expect to see? And see probably in quotation marks, because it's important to note that the perception that is provided by these devices isn't what some might call natural vision. It's more of what a lot of people with these implanted devices call maybe electric or artificial. And a lot of times with these devices, if they're functioning properly, people will see these things called phosphenes, which are small dots of light in one's field of view. And some people have referred to them as things like fireworks or cheese puffs whizzing from left to right. And I'm thinking right now of this paper by Dr. Cordelia Erickson Davis that talks a lot about these individual perceptual differences. And so there's the perceptual side where you might see these flashes of light, and with those you can maybe see the location of something roughly, or you could see in which way something is moving, and that comes a lot as well with learning strategies for how to perceive things with this new vision. And then I think the other side is not just perceptual, but how might these devices integrate into your daily life? And will they provide to you a useful sense of this new vision, in quotes?
So it's not like with the device I would go from nothing to all of a sudden be able to see the whole universe, or is it more a concern, a situation of changing my thinking?
Great question. Yes, as of right now, a lot of these devices provide a sort of rudimentary perception. It's not, you plug in this electrode and you can see everything as you once had before. It's sort of like a new language for your brain to learn. And it is exactly like you said, a new way of thinking. You have to learn this new lexicon of visual perceptions that you are being shown. And that can be a really difficult task, absolutely. And with rehabilitation and training, some people can learn to use those in a way that is beneficial. And for some people, it is maybe more of just another assistive tool that they use or choose not to if they so decide.
So what you're saying is that someone has to modify their expectations when they say, oh, there's a machine to help me see again.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's something that is really important from the clinician and the researcher side is to properly take in the individual differences of the person who might be getting this implant. So, what level of vision do you still have remaining, if any? And what has your experience been with your vision loss? Do you use any assistive tools already? Because research has shown in some cases for other sensory prostheses as well that if you use assistive tools already, that might help you learn more strategies or be able to go through these training techniques with a bit more usefulness or maybe with a bit more of a beneficial outcome for some people, but really considering these individual differences and how they play into what your expectations might be like. And I think something important to consider is setting the expectations for the researchers themselves, because oftentimes what we found in our research is that the expectations for these device outcomes differ between researchers and between those implanted. And I think another important group to consider is the friends and family of people who will be getting these devices. So making sure everyone is kind of on the same page. As of right now, a lot of people who are implanting try to emphasize that they might not work. And so people have to be okay with the fact that they might go through this procedure and they might not be able to see these phosphenes or this new artificial vision. So making sure the expectations are properly set is a really huge, important part of this process.
It would seem almost like you have a choice. Okay, I've learned to live with my blindness, or I have the frustration, and I'll call it frustration, with not having perfect, the perfect kind of vision that I ideally would like to have.
That's absolutely a trade off that people need to consider when they are looking into getting these devices because it can relate to how long somebody has been blind. For example, if somebody's been blind for 20 years and they have tried really hard to integrate assistive tools or just, get used to life without vision, providing this new sense of vision might just be something that's cumbersome to them or that is exciting and something to share about, or they desire to have this new form of perception. But, like you said, it could be something that is just not necessary for some people. For others, it can be a really exciting thing, especially I think maybe more for those who have lost their vision a bit more recently. And
Mm-hmm.
so having that input can maybe be a little bit easier to integrate into daily life when you're not as used to navigating life with your vision loss.
Well, I was thinking as you were talking about my sister who had
Mhm,
two children, and one of the things, well, it's grandchildren. She had RP, and she
mhm,
managed to raise two kids, but they had boys.
mhm.
And one of the regrets my sister said to me is, I would love to have one moment where I could see what the boys look like.
Mm, mhm.
And that might be a possibility with the devices we're talking about right now. Might be.
I I think with the devices as we currently are aware, it might be more of a situation in which it could illuminate the silhouette of a person, again, depending on the outcomes of the individual. For example, if I've chatted with somebody who was implanted with one of these devices, and he said that his wife sometimes would stand in front of a brightly lit door, like a glass door or a window, and then he might be able to see sort of her outline or something like that. But at the moment, I don't believe there's enough resolution or detail to get those fine grain facial details. And it's interesting that you mentioned that because in my interviews with people who have these devices, facial recognition is one of the most important things that people mention. and could be something for future devices to focus on restoring or to focus on how a device might focus on assisting in that desire.
Hmm. So, could you take us through the process? You get a device, you send them out the door, and they're supposed to deal with it, or is there a training that they have to uh, be comfortable with?
hmm So there's a more logistical side of, how do you get the device? Are you able, if you have insurance, to have it chip in? Because there's a lot of contention in that area, as you might imagine, if companies would assist in covering that. Or
Hmm.
if you're part of a clinical trial or more of a commercial cohort. But let's say you decide to get the device, your expectations are met, you understand that it might not have the outcome you want, but it could. Um, and you have a support system, hopefully, even if that's just your research team, but friends and family are a great support system as well. You would go through the surgery, and for these visual prostheses, they're typically implanted somewhere along the visual system, most often in the eye, typically in the retina, or in the visual cortex of the brain, where the visual signals that are taken in by your eyes and retina will eventually be sent. And so you've undergone this surgery. You have a bit of a recovery period, as you might imagine, and then they turn the device on, and these devices have electrodes that will stimulate whatever area has been implanted, and you might begin to see some dots of light or have some sort of visual perceptual experience. And with a team of clinicians, hopefully you'll have a post implantation routine or regime in which you have regular training sessions over a period of time with somebody who knows how these devices work. And so you'll learn different strategies. For example, if you have to scan your head to see an object, or how you might best integrate the device with your daily life. For example, if that's something that you'd like to use in the kitchen, maybe having an orientation and mobility instructor work with you to identify ways that it might help, or other avenues like that.
It sounds like you have to have a lot of patience and really want this change to occur before
Yes.
uh, you enter into that. Do you get a chance to kind of, in interviewing the person, saying, do you really want to go through this?
Yeah, that's a great point. It really is a process where you have to have a lot of patience. And this training can help you integrate what you are seeing
Hmm.
with your daily life. And sometimes it can help you, this training can help you better be able to use what this device is showing you to provide that real world benefit. And some people really do enjoy it. A lot of people say, um, that the devices provide them with this new and interesting stimulation and these new and interesting visual perceptions. And a lot of people who are involved in these trials, especially the clinical trials, are really motivated by this altruistic desire to help other people further down the line. And a lot of people too find community with the people who are doing the device implantations themselves and this research team, and they're able to feel like they were part of this thing that is bigger than themselves. And a lot of people who I've chatted with have found that to be really beneficial. But again, having that patience is really important, because some people, the device maybe either isn't something that works for them, so they choose not to get it. And if it is, and they find out at some point that, I'd rather just stick with the tools that I've learned to use, knowing at what point to make that decision is important as well. And something that is really essential to emphasize that other research has shown, and I've come across in my own work as well as with other people in my lab, a lot of people who are implanted with these devices when the perception that they receive from the implant isn't what they thought it would be, or maybe doesn't align with their expectations, a lot of times people interpret that as more of a personal failure
Yes.
than a device failure. And I think that that's something that really needs to be emphasized, that it's the device that's maybe not meeting your expectations instead of you not being able to work with the device.
That's an important point because, uh, people, some people do, in fact, if anything goes wrong, they think it's their fault.
Hmm.
And then get into a very depressed kind of thing. I'm a failure at everything. And, all or nothing thinking. And that can be uh, really problematic.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some research that has interviewed people with these devices that show that once you have this device, it's really exciting. You can see these new things, but
Mhm.
then maybe there's this trough where it's not what you thought and it can't do necessarily what you had hoped. And maybe you think it's more of a failure on your own point, and that's something that really needs to be emphasized. It's not the case. It's the device that is not working for you. It is not you who is doing anything wrong. And yeah, I believe that's really something that's really essential to emphasize.
Well, I think an example, I wear hearing aids, and
Hmm.
they're wonderful to a point,
Hmm.
but they're not hearing, the kind of hearing that would be most helpful. And it's frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of frustration in many ways that can come with this new perception. Either it's internal in that it's not what you thought, and maybe you feel like there's something that you could do better. And if you tried a little harder, maybe it would
Right,
work. And
right.
unfortunately, like it's the limitations of the device, not how hard you're trying. And there's the other side too, where there's this external pressure I've gleaned from some of these interviews where maybe your family or the researchers had some expectations and you feel like you are not meeting their expectations. And that can be really hard as well.
Well, so what I'm hearing is it's not going to necessarily change your life where the devices are right now. Is that an accurate statement to make, or is that because that's what they come for? Or what a lot of people come for, the idea that, oh, this device is going to change my life.
I guess it really depends on how you define change your life. Because if change your life is having this new perception and it works for you, then yeah, it can show you these new things. And if that's what you're looking for, and if that's how you define change your life, then that can work for you. But if change your life is defined as having vision as you had prior to your visual impairment, then no, at this point, these devices can't restore
Hmm.
this natural vision.
So, when people say, I can see, I can be independent,
Hmm.
is that a possible expectation, or is that, there has to be more development before that can occur?
Yeah, independence is a really important theme. We see in our research that, as I'm sure people who have visual loss themselves might underscore, this desire for independence is one of the most important things
Hmm.
in anyone's daily life, really. And you see that for some people, it does improve independence. I've chatted with an implantee who said that she used these devices to aid her in navigating daily life. And she said that it helped maybe with crossing the street or getting on the bus. But usually that is in tandem with other assistive tools like a white cane or other navigation aids. And for some people, they find that the device maybe isn't able to assist them in gaining more independence. that other tools are maybe able to assist them more, or life without tools if you learn to navigate your own life in a way that makes you feel more independent.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having independence as a measure of, I guess, quote unquote, success in these device trials is really important, because there are a lot of assessments of functional vision and visual function, I'll say. And some of them are aimed at this sort of out of the lab measure of independence and success. A few of them are aimed at that, but a lot of them are more so aimed at, can you find something? Can you tell which direction something is going in? And so I think emphasis on developing assessments and training programs that really aim to get at this increased level of independence is something that's really important in these device trials.
At the same time, the people around someone who's getting this device has to also get training about expectation, because some people, the dynamics can change when someone who's been totally dependent on other people, when they even have any independence, the other people have to be in the family have to learn how to let go.
Yeah, considering people who are around these people who are being implanted is important as well, because there's the expectation setting side, in which, of course, you want to support this person who is getting this new device, but there's also the daily independence side, where I think it's important to have conversations with these individuals about, hey, how can I most support you in this new way? I don't want to assume, and place this extra load of me deciding what might be most important for you and for me to help, but having conversations between people who are implanted and people who have not been, to see, okay, if there is a way that I can support you in your independence, please let me know. I'm happy to work on that with you, but again, not assuming what that might be.
Mm. But one of the problems within the family dynamics, because the people in the family may not realize it, but they get some of the goodies being in charge. And so when someone gets or tries to be independent, then there's tension that can occur. And I've seen this in students who go through a program for helping blind people become more independent. And then as soon as they get back into the family, and they've gotten these skills, but they're unknowingly, the family is uncomfortable with letting people have that independence. So that's a tension that just built in, if you will, in this kind of a situation.
For sure. I think that is something that is quite important to consider, in that with this new device, it's new for everyone. But again, I don't have vision loss, and so I don't want to speak on behalf of people who do, but from people who I have interviewed, just really emphasizing the importance of communication between the person who has this implant and people who are attempting to support them, to figure out the way that is most beneficial for everyone to navigate their daily
Right.
lives.
Well, you mentioned, and you were talking about developing a community. Is there a mechanism for people who are using these devices to find other people, to kind of share their experience and feel like, if they feel a little alone or disappointed, to have that community that can share their experience and help support one another?
Yeah, absolutely. Having a support system in any situation can be extremely helpful and important to have these people to lean on if you so choose, and just to really share what you're going through with someone who might get it.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm not sure if there is like a directory that people have access to of other people who have been implanted with these devices, as a lot of them are from clinical trials or
Right.
in a medical context where practitioners might not be able to share personal information. But I think with a little internet digging, we've been able to find some people who are more than happy to share their experiences.
Okay.
And so
Mm-hmm.
perhaps it might be clinician dependent, but asking if there are people who have these devices who you could talk to, I think even before you are implanted, to sort of get a sense of what it's like, but also afterwards. There are perhaps people in your community who might know people, but I'm not too sure at the moment if there's a direct link that is a reliable way of getting in contact with these people,
Okay.
aside from just looking around on the internet to see who might be more comfortable or who has chatted about their experiences in the past and sort of creating these groups. But I think if companies could assist in doing that, that would be a fantastic way to make people feel more seen, I guess, to make people feel like they have someone they can talk to and relate to.
Right.
I think that
Mm-hmm.
would be really important.
Well, I know with some conditions, the program itself will, as part of the uh, program, is that they're in a group for, at least it's some portion of the time. But how many weeks are we talking about in terms of someone going through the program that they're connected with the program on a regular basis?
It really depends on the person, the implant, if they're being implanted commercially or as part of a clinical trial,
I see.
and the distance that they are to these resources. Because, of course, if you have to drive 2 hours to
Yeah.
get to a facility, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to regularly access those resources. And so it's, of course, extremely important to have the training that you need to learn how to integrate these devices into your daily life and to learn how to interpret this new artificial vision.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and everyone should be receiving this rehabilitation training. Um, but I'm not sure if there is a consistent regime that everyone receives.
What I thought of instantly when you were saying that, I wonder
Mhm.
if Zoom would be a way to connect people. If you could get people
Mm.
people uh, to volunteer for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Things that connect people virtually, just like Zoom, like you mentioned, or even perhaps people have been considering doing work with virtual reality or some having some form of a take home rehabilitation, almost as if you were going to like physical therapy, having a
Right.
printout of the exercises that you might do, something like that, where you can practice in the meantime. There is a person with an implant who comes to mind when I'm speaking of this. He practices at home by having this whiteboard, and he has dark shapes printed out, and he or his family will place, the shapes on this whiteboard, and using the contrast perception provided by the device, he'll do his best to sort of train and practice shape detection and things like that. But it's also important to practice activities that are most impactful in your daily life, whether that be cooking or navigating or, picking out something in the grocery store or doing your personal finances, things that are assessing and practicing how your vision functions, but also how it can help you in your daily life too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It being integrated with this new device back into life is what we're
Hmm.
talking about. And
Yes, absolutely.
which of course also means keeping yourself mentally healthy, because And this is the issue we were mentioning a little earlier, the issue of failure or the perception of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that I've been aware of. Frequently, people with blindness tend to be perfectionists
Mm.
because we feel like we have to compete and be better than, or at least be as good as, those who are fully sighted. And they set all kinds of standards for themselves. And you're going to have the same kind of thing. You may have the same kind of thing when you get a device. You think, oh, I don't have to be, I can be like
Mhm.
everyone else. And
Mm.
and if you perceive that you're not, then having support of other people who are going through the same kind of thing can be very helpful.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think having that support system, as you mentioned, with people who really get it can be extremely helpful, as you just mentioned. And I could extrapolate from what you've said about this feeling of perfectionism, that being excited about having this device that might help you attain that ideal.
Mm-hmm.
And if your ideal is met, then fantastic. But if your ideal isn't met, then how that could be just another level of frustration.
Mm-hmm.
And as you mentioned with mental health support, I know in some of these clinical trials, people have to meet with a therapist, which I
Good.
think is fantastic. Right, exactly. And I think I'm not sure how frequent these meetings occur, but having a therapist, especially a therapist who is well versed in people who have visual impairments, ideally, and I'm not sure if this exists, but some sort of therapist who has worked with people who have these implants before, somebody who's informed in that sense, could be quite helpful.
And of course, the difficulty is finding someone who,
Absolutely.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's another way in which your Zoom suggestion could play in as well,
Mm-hmm.
having access virtually too.
Well, what other thing do you think that people need to pay attention to in terms of their mental health?
I think that with people who are considering being implanted, as well as with people who are currently implanted, just as anyone, keeping track of your mental health, noting if there is any pattern in anxiety or depression, and if you can associate it maybe with the device use, or if the device sort of alleviates some sort of social anxiety. Just seeing if you can note any patterns in regard to mental health. And of course, I am not a therapist myself, and so chatting with somebody who is clinically licensed to have these conversations, just maintaining your mental health. I know that's easier said than done, absolutely, but making sure that you have that support system can be really helpful. And yeah, as you mentioned, speaking with a clinician.
Yeah, if someone's highly anxious, they're going to have, I would imagine, some, keep trying to work with the thing, make it work, just feel the pressure. And to be
Mm-hmm.
able, now this is independent from blindness, but if
Mm-hmm.
something can be done to alleviate the anxiety, they may find they're more comfortable with the device.
Anything that can be done to increase independence, as we were mentioning earlier, as well as alleviate any anxieties caused by this device, I think will not only improve, you know, how you're feeling, how you are coping with using this device, how you are coping with this new artificial vision, addressing those and being sure to feel comfortable enough to have these conversations about your mental health can make adjustments to this new perception a lot more comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Is there any mental health evaluation in any of the clinical trials in terms of checking out where people are so you have a better sense who's going to be able to do this? Because,
Great question.
yeah.
I think for some clinical trials, I think that it may vary device to device and researcher to researcher, but for a lot of these clinical trials, there are criteria that need to be met for people to be implanted with these devices. And I think that you likely will have to meet some sort of psychological testing threshold to be considered for this device. Because the device needs to be able to meet you where you are. And
in order to improve the chance of success.
yeah, absolutely. So some of these trials do take into consideration and do, prior to implantation, test for different psychological, do different psychological assessments, such as anxiety and depression. Yes.
Yeah, and then, from that, if nothing else, if they're doing clinical testing, they may find that certain types of people just may not be emotionally ready or suitable to try to work with this device.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that considering where somebody's mental state is at prior to implantation can be of extreme importance. As you mentioned, yes, just making sure to take the whole person's picture into consideration, and not just if you stimulate this part of the brain, might they see something, but are they at a point in their life where this is a good option for them mentally? Or do they have a support system or a mental health professional to guide them through this or assist them with this process?
Yeah.
Or, just working to increase independence. Taking that mental state into consideration is, very essential.
Yeah, their aspiration. Because I know for a great many people, the idea, oh, I can find sight.
Mhm.
And, and they're, like, this is going to be the miracle that's going to make a change for me. And that's where we run into trouble.
Of course, yeah, if those expectations, if you are expecting, I'm going to get this surgery and I'm going to go through this and I'm going to have these outcomes that maybe don't match the actual expected outcomes of the device, that sort of crash of realization that might occur if the expectations are not properly set can be really detrimental.
The disappointment and again, as we spoke of earlier, we blame ourselves. We're really
Absolutely.
we're really somebody ought to be checking that out, because that just simply reinforces for people, that sense of failure just reinforces there's something wrong with them rather than, as you said, the device.
Yeah, this research that I conducted with my lab colleague Lucas Nadolskis, we find that the expectations for the devices in terms of what is assumed and desired between researchers and people who are implanted and what is actually done can be quite different. So making sure to maintain and set what is actually possible and think of it in a way that emphasizes that it is the device that should be working for you, not vice versa, as we previously mentioned.
Well, I would hate to be the person to tell somebody, no, we don't think you should get the device, because when somebody's, just so sure that this is going to be a life changer.
Yeah, I can imagine how that role would be quite emotional. But I do think that with these assessments prior to implantation, to assess if somebody is fit for participation or for implantation, one might learn more about themselves and what they expect. And if they do end up not being fit for a device, these outcome measures might be informative of how they might increase independence, or I guess how they might apply them to their daily life without the implant too. So hopefully there might be some benefit in going through that, but I can imagine that situation could be quite emotionally taxing.
Well, there's certainly to understand. I think one of the things that you're talking about is that we have to know what we're looking for. We, the patient, has to really have an understanding what they're looking for and whether the device is going to meet that need. And that's I guess that's part of your job in talking with people is to,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that in part, I think that it's researchers having conversations with people who have been implanted and understanding what are the possibilities and limitations with these devices, but also on the other side, without being implanted with these devices ourselves, we can't really understand the full picture of what it's like. And so for people to have conversations with people who have been previously implanted, and for the design of these devices to be informed and perhaps ideally even co-designed with those who have visual impairments and those who have gone through this procedure before, I think would be a very ideal way to improve outcomes.
Well, is there currently a mechanism for doing that, getting people to who are using it to kind of explain that to, or shall we say, a sponsorship program where someone who's been using the device can kind of be an ear uh, to uh, to someone who's contemplating it or someone who starts out as kind of that support system we were talking about. Because it sounds like
Yeah,
there's a lot of support that's needed in this.
definitely. I think that having a support system throughout all of this, even though other people's expectations might influence your own, having a support system overall of a variety of people, friends, family, clinicians, researchers, therapists, etc., can be extremely beneficial in adapting to use with this device, along with the actual perceptual outcomes that the device provides. But I don't know if there is at the moment a social support group of individuals who have been previously implanted, as that might be a bit hindered by the medical nature of these implantations and, personal health information sharing. But I think that if you're considering this device, asking your clinician, hey, could I be put in contact with somebody who is okay talking
Good
about
idea.
this? Or ideally, yeah, reaching out to those resources of people who are on the research team or the clinical team to see if they might be able to put you in contact with someone. But also, there may be ways to search online and find out people who have been in news articles, or people who have written blogs or books or things like that, who would potentially be open to sharing their experiences with you as well. But I think that, yeah, a regimented way, a documented support group, a contact list, or something like that, where people could reach out to each other would be fantastic.
Is there a list around that says, these are places that are offering this kind of either clinical trials or maybe serving people who want an implant? Do you know?
Sorry, do you mean like a list of people who might be interested, or a list of people who have already been
A list
implanted?
of those people who are providing the implant. In other words, your program and other programs across the country, so that someone could check with someone that's near them, find them.
Ah, yes, absolutely. Great question. Our lab actually runs a website. It's called bionic-vision.org. And we try and use it as a way to create this sort of Wikipedia repository of all things bionic vision. And so we have listed on there current devices, current research groups. We also interview people who are involved in these projects as like research spotlights to try and make that conversation more accessible to people who otherwise wouldn't have access to these researchers, or it would be at least really difficult to get in contact with them. But I would suggest checking out that website, bionic-vision.org, as a great way to look into that as a little self-plug. But also a lot of these existing devices that are undergoing clinical trials are likely recruiting through clinicaltrials.gov. And that website can be a bit tricky to navigate. So I think chatting with your provider or a doctor who you may be seeing and seeing who they might be able to put you in contact with could be a good way to learn more if it's something you're seriously considering.
So if Aftersight could access that information and have it in our resource list, if someone didn't get that information, they could call us and get some resources from Aftersight, the sponsoring organization, because we are working with resource lists for services to people with blindness, and that would be a great addition if we don't have it already.
Yeah, of course. You'd be more than welcome to include our information from that website on your website. I think that one of the goals of this website is to have a way for the general public who are maybe not as involved in the research side or on the clinical side to have access to this information in an easy to digest way. So having that available on your website, I think, would be fantastic. Yeah.
Great. So what I'm hearing is, we're still the whole field in kind of an infant stage in terms of there's a lot of clinical trials and trying to perfect, but I'm not hearing that people can go out and go driving with these devices, but to at least, well, how would you put it? What people who are successful with this, we're saying that they can get some independence. They'll be able to locate things, but it's still far away from, being, as they say, to drive. And
Yes.
We don't even know if we can get to that, but it's a work in progress, but it is not for everybody. And the part of what has to happen, if I hear you right, is that people moderate their expectations and talk over with the clinician, what they can expect from it. And so that they can make a logical decision whether to proceed with it. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that was a fantastic summary. I'd say you hit the nail on the head. I think that, just as you mentioned, for some people, these devices can provide a useful form of visual perception that integrates well with their daily life, and whether that be through increasing independence in tasks around the home or navigating life, walking down the street, or through creating these new social communities that can be beneficial for people as well. But there can also be ways in which, if the device doesn't work as expected, or if expectations aren't properly set, that can be, devastating to somebody who is expecting it to do something that it can't, and that can lead to feelings of it being a personal failure, as we chatted about earlier, when in reality, it's a limitation of the device not doing or not being able to do what you had hoped. And so having a support system and having your team be able to set your expectations properly and make sure that you're in the proper place in your life to be receiving a device such as this, and to make sure that it can be something that can actually, improve your quality of life, improve your independence, and assessing, what the goals that you would have for this device might be, and see if there's a way to tailor it, or to have rehabilitation programs where you learn strategies to use this device in a way that's most beneficial for you. But yeah, exactly as you mentioned, it's all still a work in progress. And so I think integrating people who have visual impairments in this research, and especially chatting with people who've already had these implants, you can't make a device for a user if it's not informed by the user. And so having those conversations, I think, along with, of course, improving learning more about the visual system, and improving the devices themselves, can all work together to create something that could be more beneficial to more people.
Nice summary.
Thank you.
Lily, you've been a great guest. And I hope
Thank you
that we
so
can
much.
keep in contact with how things are going, and maybe have you on again. I appreciate your input. This is a new thing, and I'm glad to be able to give it to our public, to know that there's something happening, but everyone has to be very mindful in terms of looking into it and what their expectations are.
Absolutely, and it's been a delight chatting with you as well. I feel honored that you reached out to me, and having this conversation has been really fun, and I encourage anyone who's interested to check out that website, and also feel free to look into our lab's work as well. And there's a lot of really interesting research going on there, and a lot of the barrier in getting these devices to people who it might benefit is that a lot of people don't know about them. So having these conversations, sharing these resources could be quite important for getting these devices to the right people. So thank you so much for having me.
Could you just say the website again for people who may not have caught it?
The sort of Wikipedia of all things bionic vision that our lab has aimed to create is called bionic-vision.org. And then, a bit confusingly, if you'd like to look into our lab's research specifically, we're at bionicvision.org, so no dash.
Great. Thank you for being our guest. This is Bill Lundgren. Thank you all for listening, and stay tuned for the next program.